for a serious investor. It's also a living document. It's not something that you publish, bind, and then send off. It should be something that you're continuously updating and changing, as opposed to your dissertation that once you publish it, it's done, right? The lean canvas, you may have seen this before. This is often called the business model canvas. We're going to talk about this more in session 2, actually. The lean canvas is usually a one-page document. It's a summary of your early stage thinking. It's something that can iterate very quickly. It captures the very core of your business model without all the overhead of the full business plan. It's very good for testing assumptions quickly, for making sure the core logic of your business model is visible. And it's your starting point. It's not often, it's not a replacement of the business plan. It's often a starting point. It's something that will iterate a few times until you've settled it. And then you would then deep dive into the full business plan and explain all of the bullet points on the lean canvas. It's very good for agile thinking. It's very useful to have early discussions with potential partners, even potential investors, but especially business partners. I find it's very useful for business partners when you're trying to articulate your ideas and put them onto paper without giving too much away or without spending the time to do too much. And then the last document is a pitch deck. So this is a slide deck. It is intended to be presented orally. It needs to be sexy. It needs to be very professional. It needs to be watertight in terms of how it looks, how you present it. It needs to be practiced and rehearsed a whole bunch of times. You need a script to go along with it that makes you sound authentic and passionate and well-versed in your topic. You know what you're saying. You're able to defend all of your thoughts. Each word in your script is precisely chosen. Any questions that come up, you are able to answer without along the way. It is your oral presentation to people who you need something from, whether it's money, support, endorsement, anything you need from people. The pitch deck is where you go. Again, it's a little bit of a living document. It may change over time, but it needs to be really slick, really perfect. Right? Think about your oral defense presentation. Similarly, it is something that your oral defense presentation is something that is super well done. It is very slick and sexy. It presents all of the work that you've done in your doctoral research. It presents your findings in a way that is very convincing, very supported with evidence. So a pitch deck is an equivalent, but it is more of a sales document than a research document. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the value proposition. This is what I was talking about when I said you need to know the need. Okay. The most important part of a viable business is if you have a clear value proposition and you know the problem that you're solving and for whom. Who wants your product? It's the only question that matters. Okay. Not this is my product, not this was my research. It really needs to be who has the need? Do I know that need? Do I understand that need? Have I understood it? Am I convincing people that I've understood it? And then here I have a solution for that need. Okay, everything else follows that. The value proposition is the first place you have to start. So if you're working on your doctoral research, you've got this idea that you've designed the new amazing product, tool, technology, whatever. You must relate it to a need. And you need to focus on understanding that need in the market so much that you are the expert of that need more than you are the expert of the solution. Okay, so you start with the need. So a viable problem has 3 qualities. Okay, a problem worth building has 3 qualities. It is painful, it is pervasive, and it is poorly served. Okay. So painful means it causes real pain, tangible frustration. Um, it could be costly. It could be reputation based. It could be just annoying. It takes up time. It takes up resources. It is genuinely painful to the person experiencing the problem. It could be that they have to hire extra people, or it takes 4 times longer than they think it should be, or just they don't even realize that it's taking them time. They don't even realize that it's taking them a long time to do something. And when you come in and say, those 4 hours that you spend every week doing this one thing, I can I can help you get it down to 30 minutes. You are now producing a solution that addresses their pain. Okay. The Gary Pickens situation is the example here is that the inability that they couldn't do capital planning for hospital, they didn't even realize that they were just guessing on their capital planning. They didn't even realize that this was something that they could do better. He came in and said, I can help you create real responses, real evidence based forecasting for your capital planning. And they were like, that's very interesting. They didn't realize that that could be done. When something is pervasive, it means that many people or organizations are experiencing, not just one person, not just your family, not just your friends, not just a niche, but a problem that is shared by many people and have the same problem. And it could be that you're the only person who's noticed that this is a problem. I tell my students a lot of times, because they're young, I tell them that when I was their age, I didn't realize I needed to carry a computer in my pocket all day long, right? Many of you will remember a time where you didn't need your phone. You didn't even know you needed a phone. You didn't know that you needed to be able to look things up on the internet all the time. You didn't know that you could text someone instantly, right? You had to go home and use a landline to call somebody. We didn't know we needed these things. And so you may be the only person who sees that there's that need, but you need to see that there is pain and pervasive frustration across a large number of people or a large number of organizations that is not being addressed. Okay, and so the Gary Pickens situation there is that he had a market of every hospital in the country, and the time in America it was about 7,000 hospitals. So you can imagine 7,000 hospitals, none of them know how to do forecasting on a business level. That's a pervasive problem. And then the third point is being poorly served, meaning that either there's no solution, like I was saying, back when I was the age of my students, I didn't know that there was a phone needed to be in my pocket, a computer needed to be in my pocket, um, or the existing solutions are inadequate, they're expensive, they're inaccessible. You need to hire a programmer, you need to hire someone to run it because it requires specialized knowledge, things like that. Um, when solutions either don't exist or are inaccessible or difficult, then that means it's a poorly served problem. For in Gary's situation, in he knew that those data sources existed, but the relationship between them had never been brought together, and so there was no one who was looking at all three of those data sources to help hospitals find a way to do evidence-based business planning. Okay. So as you're thinking about this, I really want you to think about your own work. As you're listening to me, think about your own work and which of these three P's, the painful, the pervasive, or the, do you put a comment in the chat if you can explain which of the three P's your business idea touches on? Is it that it's painful? Is it that it's pervasive? Is it that it's poorly served, or is it all three? I'm going to just quickly look at the chat. Okay, here we go. All three, good. Painful and pervasive, very good. All three poorly served. Almost impossible. Okay, that's fantastic. Two is okay. Good, good, great. So that's great. So what that's telling you is that you're understanding and you're really it's making sense to you that these three areas really need to be addressed as part of your business planning. So that's great. Let me go back to my screen. All right. So let's look at the value proposition canvas. I'm not sure if you've seen this before. It's a fairly common document. If you've done any entrepreneurial work, you may have come across this before. It's a really, really good tool to start making your thinking concrete. Okay. So on the right side, you've got the customer profile. What are your target customers trying to get done? What frustrates or blocks them? And what outcomes that they actually want? Okay. This is it's not necessarily guesswork. Okay, it can be guesswork at first, but these are things that you would want to get evidence about as you do more research. And on the left, you've got the value map. Okay, what do you offer? How does it relieve their frustrations? And how does it create the outcomes that they want? And when you can fit those two things together, you can fit two sides of this together, the customer profile, the needs, and the value map, the deliverables, then you've got a good fit and you've got a viable product. Okay. I want you to think about that your research question is what sharpens your understanding of the right side. Your findings are the evidence that fit between the left and the right, making sure that it's achievable. Most founders spend many months in the market trying to understand what you already know because your research has driven you to the point where you understand this more than anybody else. Okay, I'm going to show you what this looks like in Gary's situation. Okay, so Gary well, I'm using the situation just to give it some relatability, hopefully. So on this side, on the customer side, his customer is the hospital administrator, okay? Or more precisely, the chief operating officer or the VP of planning at a hospital system, something like that. What are they trying to get done? They need to make capital investment decisions. How many beds, which departments, which facilities that they need to grow. And that could take 5 to 10 years to build. Imagine these are big capital decisions, big capital investments, and they need to make it sure that they do it right because if they make the wrong decision in 10 or 15 years, they could have developed a department that nobody needs. Okay, and that's what they're hired to do. What are their pains? They're flying blind. They're making multi-million-dollar infrastructure decisions based on current patient volumes and gut instinct. They have no reliable way to model the future demand, and the consequences of getting that wrong are severe. If you build too much orthopedic capacity in an area that ages out, then you're underinvesting in obstetrics in a neighborhood that's about to see a decade of family immigration. These are real money, real consequences decisions. So they need numbers that they can defend. They need forecasts that they build themselves and so on. If we look at the value map, Gary's product triangulates all three of these databases to produce exactly the number they need. It relieves the pain by replacing gut instinct with evidence. If they have defensible forecasting, they apply a methodology that a hospital administrator couldn't do themselves, so it gives them that credibility. They create a product that's easy to use and delivers confidence. So they're doing all these things to relieve the pain, relieve that frustration, provide a product that speaks to the need, and gives them a win that they can defend against, the credibility that they need to make good decisions. Okay, he knew this because he had been on both sides of this. And I now want you to think about your own research and who is your customer potentially and what are they trying to get done. Okay, so in the chat, I want you to try to create one sentence. So take a minute or two to think about this before you type it in. What problem does your research or idea address and for whom? And I want you to write using this format. The problem for who. Okay, so I want you to write the problem and then for who. For example, the lack of leadership pipelines for first-gen managers and SMEs. Okay, so the problem first and then the for who. Okay, Take a minute before you think about it, and then drop it in the chat. I'm just going to give you a minute to do that. Excellent. Technology investment decisions for regulated industries. Wonderful. So there's the problem. Technology investment decisions. I'm assuming that's a problem. And then the regulated industries, meaning unregulated industries, maybe don't have the same problem. I don't know. That's for you to answer, Michelle. Okay. Okay, that's number one. Here we go. Inconsistent customer orders resulting to business revenue. Inconsistent customer orders resulting to business revenue. I'm not sure I completely understand that one. Hopefully that's clear. Lack of understanding on how to develop organizational leadership using AI. Lack of understanding on how to develop organizational leadership using AI. Okay, so Ray, here you've got a problem, lack of understanding on how to develop organizational leadership using AI. I think that's the problem. What you're missing here is for who? Who are you building that to? Who has the pain? Who's the one who's really frustrated here? For Lee here, the problem of finding reliable employees for small businesses. So the problem is finding reliable employees. You'd have to define what reliable means. And small business is your for whom. Again, you'd have to define small business. Lack of exit strategy planning by small business owners. I like that one. Lack of exit strategy planning, small business owners. So the problem is they don't have exit strategy planning, and the audience is small business owners. Good. Academia and industry disconnect. That's a problem, but who's it for? Lack of good and affordable vision care for people living in rural India. Lack of good and affordable vision care for people living. Okay, that's great. Okay. Loads of information. Loads of information with proper analysis leading to proper diagnosis for treating doctors using AI in day-to-day healthcare. Loads of information with proper analysis leading to proper diagnosis for treating. Okay, I'm not sure who the audience is on that one. Lack of employees development in international schools. Okay. High talent attrition for Indian engineering consulting firms due to leadership and employee autonomy challenges. That's the problem. Who is the audience? Okay, that's great. I think you're getting the point, a lot of you. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but remember, it's really about what's the need and who are you resolving it for. I'm just going to go back to the previous slide. Keep this value proposition canvas in mind. Okay, take a screenshot if you have to. Okay, you can find this online. This is not something I created. Okay, your research question sharpens your value map. You know this field, you know this topic better than anybody else. And that is one of your competitive advantages. But you may forget, and many people do, to really put yourself in the position of the customer, the need. What outcomes do they want? What are they trying to get done? And what is frustrating or blocking them? So make sure you start with that and then fit your solution to their needs, to the customer profile. Okay. All right, great. So let's move on to market analysis. Now, market analysis is a very unsexy part of a business plan. The students hate doing it. A lot of people hate doing it. It is trudging through material and coming up with insights. Now, AI helps, but obviously we don't rely completely on AI for our critical thinking. So you do have an unfair advantage here again, because trudging through literature is something you have become good at, or at least you are getting really good at. Okay, so you've been trudging through hundreds of papers of literature, reading them, discerning whether or not something's relevant, whether it's insightful, whether it's relevant to your work, whether it has any um, context for your research question. And so this is something that, even if it's unsexy and even if your literature review was very painful, it is something you know how to do. So keep that in mind, because a lot of founders skip over this completely. They don't understand their markets. They go on gut instinct. Some of them get lucky. We've all heard the stories about founders who just get lucky because they just happen upon something that matches something. But the market analysis is one of those things that will give you a huge competitive advantage. And because you know already how to do research, you already have one step up. Okay. Um, Let me jump in. So one model, there's several models, but the pestle one is a good one to start with. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to start with the pestle one. If you know this one already, it'll be familiar. It is a very, very useful framework to do your research from. There are 6 lenses: political, economic, social, technical, technology, legal, and environmental. And the purpose is to understand the forces shaping the context of your business in the market where your business will operate, forces that you cannot control, but that you need to anticipate. Okay. We've all seen in the last year and a half some crazy decisions coming out of a large country that I don't prefer not to name, which has completely affected in huge waves of terrible effects across the globe, um, politically, economically, legally, even environmentally, decisions that have affected us that we have no control over at all. Um, Not having control over something is not an excuse to not look at it. And in fact, one of the things that often derails a business in the early days is that they didn't anticipate certain political changes, economic changes, things like that. Now, we don't have crystal balls. We can't see into the future. We don't know really what's going to happen. But if we take our research brain and we look at the market that we're operating in, or the sector or the niche that we're looking into, we can anticipate certain things, or at least we can anticipate volatility. And that alone is an insight that a lot of founders won't have, and a lot of entrepreneurs just ignore. Okay. So the research brain that you are developing or you have developed is something that you can apply in putting together a really good pestle analysis that will help you not only understand your market, but put parameters around your business and your products to make sure that you fit into the needs of your customers, given volatility or given growth or shrinkage in any particular market or sector. Okay. For Gary's healthcare analytics, for example, the political lens would flag healthcare policy, data sharing regulations. Back then, we didn't have a lot of that, but it came pretty soon. The social lens would surface the very demographic aging trends that powered his tools. The technology lens would capture the increasing availability of large clinical data sets, which at that time, I remember the data showed up on reel tapes of reels, right? We had 45 reels that showed up with data, and we had to figure out how to pull data off of those reels. Boy, that was fun. If it's used properly, the pestle doesn't just describe context. Okay, it gives you the context so that you can make smart, credible, evidence-based assumptions. I mentioned assumptions before, and I talked about business planning. We're all making assumptions. We assume that somebody likes Red Sox. We assume that the market will go up or down or shrink or grow. We're assuming, and we assume that people want our product. We assume that the need is there. We assume that the pain is there. All of the stuff we did on the value proposition, those are all assumptions. And what you want to do is try and find as much evidence to support your assumptions, credible, real evidence, and the pestle helps you deep dive into 6 particular areas. And again, using your research brain, using the work that you've done the methodologies that you develop just in doing your dissertation work will help you do these kinds of macro environmental analysis, that even micro environmental analysis properly. Okay. So let's look at opportunity assumptions. Okay. These may be things that you've seen before. But I'm going to say something really controversial at this point. You want to find the smallest target that you can for your initial launch. Just going to say that again. You want to find the smallest market you can for your initial launch. And how do you do that? You start by looking at the total addressable market, the TAM. Again, you may know these already. I don't want to repeat things that you already know. But for those of you who don't, TAM is the entire global demand for your potential solution. Okay, it's useful, but nobody will really think of that as your target. We joke about, well, everybody wears socks, so the entire world is almost the entire world is our target market for socks. That's not useful. It's not a way. It's not a practical way to run a business, and it's to launch a business, and it's something that an investor won't think of as credible. So then you go down to a smaller area, which is your serviceable available market. This is the part of the TAM that you can realistically reach, given your geography, your channel, your capacity. It's really where you feel like you can get your hands around. It's the portion that you can reach with your knowledge, your network, things like that. It's important, it says be honest here, because it's important that you don't overestimate your influence in the market or your reach in the market. It's important that those are realistic. And this would be part of your pitch to investors. And this is where they would question how you came up with some of your assumptions about your available market. But the most important one is the serviceable obtainable market. This is your realistic market, what you can capture in the first 3 to 5 years. And this is what investors actually care about. This is where they're going to question, tell me how you can reach those customers. How do you think you can convert them from prospects to customers and so on? And my controversial addition to this thinking is, how small can you get it? Okay, let me explain. Let's say, I'm going to use a very generic situation because this is one my students often get. So let's say you're going to sell services to students in Paris. Okay, I live in Paris. We have, I don't know, dozens of schools. We have hundreds of thousands of students who come in every year. A lot of those are international students. And let's say you want to sell services to international students. Well, your target market, your addressable market in Paris alone, already it's a serviceable market because you're based in Paris, could be 200,000 students. Okay, so you're like, okay, well, I'm going to sell concierge service to 200,000 students. And you run your numbers and you're like, I'm going to be a bazillionaire, everything's going to be wonderful. Here's the problem. You've got students from every corner of the world. You've got students doing every type of study that you can think of. You've got students who are in different life stages. Some of them might be 18 years old, some of them might be 38 years old. You've got students who have money, you have students who don't have money. You have students who are interested in technology, happy to use new tools. You have students who prefer to read poetry by the Seine. And if you put out a product to all of those students, you are only going to be able to be recognized by a few of them. And this is what I mean by that, is when it comes down to attracting your customers, you need messaging. And the messaging that you put out has to be relevant to people. And a message is only relevant to someone if they recognize themselves in the message. Okay? So if you put out a message saying, hello, international students, I'm going to sell you an expensive concierge service so that we can help you find an apartment, get your visa sorted out, get you set up with Wi-Fi, et cetera, et cetera. It's expensive. So the students who don't have money, they're just going to walk by. They're not going to even pay attention. The small niche of students who have enough money to pay for your services, they will pay attention. But let's say you sent out that message to 200,000 people, and let's say the number of students who have enough money to pay for your service is only 50,000 students or 20,000 students, you're sending out a message to 200,000 and only 10% of those people can even hear your message. So you've now spent a lot of time and money and energy putting out that message to a large group of people and only 10% can hear them. If you spent time at the beginning understanding that your obtainable market was only 20,000 people, you can now reduce all of that time and research and resources and work and money and energy to addressing just 20,000. And now you've got a much more powerful argument for any investor putting money into you to say, I've identified my target obtainable market is 20,000 people. Sure, the larger market is 200,000, but only 20,000 can actually afford my product. And now you can concentrate all of your time and effort, your money, your resources, your energy, your creativity, and everything else into addressing how to get those 20,000 people to be your customers. It feels very counterintuitive. I know. It feels very counterintuitive to say, well, my potential market is 10 million people, but I'm going to narrow it down to just 500,000 people, and I'm going to somehow lose the others. When you're doing a startup, if you have 20,000 customers in your first year or 500,000 customers in your first 5 years, you are doing very well. If you get that far, you are doing very, very well. You don't need the 10 million or the 200,000 students to be your initial customers. If you can get your first obtainable market, if you can establish yourself in that, even if it's as small as you can get, then you're going to be doing very well. So I hope I explained that. I know it's a bit controversial to think about how small can you get, but being small means you're much more likely to be successful and to get an early grip on the market, and your investors will be much more convinced that you know the market and that you've done your research, you've done your, you've got the evidence to support your assumptions and so on. Okay, I'm going to move on. Hopefully that resonated. Okay, so let me just make sure that you know that your literature review is not your competitive analysis, but it does give you an advantage over people who've never done a lit review because, as I said, literature review, and I know you all know this, it is hard, it takes time, it is boring at sometimes, it is very rigorous as an academic exercise. A lot of doctoral students never get past the literature review because of the work it takes. So once you know how to do that, you know how to do a good competitive analysis. The skill that you've developed in writing your literature review is exactly the skill that you need to do good competitive analysis. Okay, and your literature review, because you have mapped the landscape of what's happened in your field or happening in your field, it really gives you an amazing starting point for your competitive analysis. In your competitive analysis, you're looking at your direct competitors, people who are solving the same problem. And a lot of times people think, well, no one's doing this. No one is doing this, so I don't have any direct competitors. Think about it this way. Anybody who is taking the same money, that is the money that you would need your customer to spend on you, that's your competitor. Okay? I tell my kids at my school, if you are opening a chicken restaurant, you are competing with another chicken restaurant, the McDonald's down the street, the corner store, the grocery store, and also the lunchbox that's coming from home. Because all of those are taking money from the chicken that you'd want people to buy from you. Okay? So those are your competitors, both your direct and your indirect competitors. Your customers, what else are they doing? Because they don't have your solution, what are they doing to meet their needs? And you have to expand your view beyond the niche that you're addressing to really think about your competitors, okay? And then your differentiation. Why you? Why now? Why are you better, cheaper, faster, more luxurious, less luxurious, more accessible, less accessible than anybody else? And this is where the work that you've done with your literature review and the evidence that you can collect because you know how to do this, makes you in a much stronger position than anyone else in the field. Okay, competitive analysis is broader than you might think, and really try to expand. You think about where the budget is coming from, what it's being spent on now, that is taking away from, or could take away from the budget that you want them to spend on you. Okay. Okay. So here's another little exercise. I want you to try um, your roughly sizing your research area or business idea. Okay. Think there's three questions here. Think through them in order. First, how many organizations or people face this problem globally? That's your TAM. Don't worry about order of magnitude. It's no big deal. Just rough number. Secondly, how many could you realistically reach in your first 2 years? Okay, given where you are, given what you have now, that's your SAM. And then thirdly, how many customers do you think you need to break even? Very basic number. Try and get that number small. Break even, maybe big number, maybe a small number for you. I'm not sure. Okay, just think about it very quickly and then put your TAM in the chat and I'll have a look. Okay, your TAM, all regulated telecom and utility industries across the globe. Wow, enormous. That's fantastic. Global TAM, 20 to 25 million. Excellent. Every doctor in the globe. Amazing. Mine's a leadership development challenge. TAM could be any company. Yes, good. Fantastic. Who else? Thousands. Sam, 125. Very good. Excellent. All job seekers. Great. That's a nice big number. All software services. Okay. 5 to 8,000 P2Ps. Excellent. Okay, so I think you guys are getting it. The TAM is a big number, right? TAM is, 150 I don't know if that's numbers or thousands, but anyway, first time job seekers. Good. So you're getting it. The TAM is a big number, okay? The next challenge then is how many could you realistically reach in your first 2 years? And really try and be realistic with that assessment. Okay, really try to bring it down to the point where it's something that either you yourself have contacts or we get so excited about our ideas. We get so excited and optimistic about our solutions because you've identified a need, you've identified a problem, you've done your value proposition, you know that people have the pain, they have the frustration, you know that your solution addresses that pain and addresses the frustration. You know that it'll make people's lives better, faster, cheaper, whatever. So we get very excited. But it turns out when you go out into the world, not everyone's excited as you. And the SAM is a way for you to approach your initial market in a way that really makes it something that you can touch, right? These are people that you could get in touch, that you could get in front of, that you could speak to. So that's really how you get down to the SAM. And then finally, as I said before, and this is something that I say many times with my students as well, the the obtainable market. The smaller you make it, the more likely you are to be successful. Okay, I know it sounds counterintuitive and it might make you feel nervous, but the smaller you get your initial market, the more likely you are to be able to get a foothold, to test your value proposition, to launch your MVP or whatever it is you need to do, and start establishing yourself in the market. And even if you go from a market of 10 million down to 10,000, if you can get those 10,000 customers in the first 6 months or a year or 2 years of your business, that changes everything. Once you've established yourself, you've proven that your product is valuable, you've proven that the world needs your product, you have testimonials from people, etc., etc. You can look at the management of innovation cycles. You get your early adopters in. Everything else is easier after that. So try to come up with the smallest number of initial, what we call beachhead markets, the first place you go. Try to make that number as small as possible. If it's B2B, take 5 companies, examine them really detailed, know their budget cycles, who's making decisions, how can you convince them that their need has a solution, etc. Take 5 companies and just try to get in those 5 company doors. If you're doing B2C, try and get those numbers. 10,000 is a great number to have. If you get 10,000 B2C customers in the first year, you're doing super well. So really try to do that, even though it might make you feel nervous. I promise you, it is one of the differentiators between a successful startup and one that struggles. Okay. Okay. So let's summarize what we've come through today. First one, your DBA, your dissertation is producing or has produced a researcher who thinks more rigorously than most founders. That gives you an unfair advantage in any marketplace that you go into. Okay, and some of the raw material that you've done in your literature, in your findings, in your methodology chapters, and so on. Some of your work is the raw material for your business plan. Don't dismiss it completely. Don't copy paste it because it's not the same language, but it does give you some of the raw materials that you can build on for your business planning. Second point, a viable business starts with a real problem, the need, the definition of the need. That's where you need to start. The painful, pervasive, and poorly served framework is a good place to think about it. Your research question is a good place to start because you've already identified a gap, right? You've identified a gap in the world, in the market, in the research. And that gap may be equivalent, may be exactly the need, or it may be something that needs to be converted a little bit into a producible product. But it is something you've already done and you've been able to defend your research gap. So it's the same idea. You would need to defend that this is a real problem in the market. And so you have, again, an unfair advantage. And then lastly, evidence-based market analysis is additionally your unfair advantage. The skill that you've used to do your literature review is exactly what you need to do for good competitive analysis. Don't skip over this step. It is super important. Try to forecast. Try to use real and credible evidence, just like you're doing with your dissertation. Try to get a little bit out of the academic into the real world, and make sure that your assumptions are defensible, your decisions are defensible, and so on. Okay. Before we go on, before we finish up today, just write in the chat, what is the market potential of your research, not your business idea, your research? Is it niche? Is it regional? Is it national? Is it global? I'm just curious to see where you are. National, global, 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 excellent. Global, global, national, niche, niche, global. Okay, great. So I think that, in my opinion, those of you who are saying niche, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to do the wonderful 10 billion. Fantastic. For those of you who are starting niche, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to create a SOM, a serviceable, obtainable market, easier because you're already thinking in the niche. For those of you who are thinking global, it might be a little bit more of a step to get to the serviceable, obtainable market. But trust me, I know it feels counterintuitive, but trust me, that's going to be a much easier proposition for the launch of your business. Okay? Okay, I'm going to give you a minute in a second, I'm just going to give you a minute for some questions. We still have 15 minutes, so we're good. Let me just give you a preview of what we're going to cover in the next session. I think it's June 9th, if I'm not mistaken. The next part, we're really going to start looking at how to build the business. So this part was really about establishing and converting your research to a business plan. Now we're going to be looking at building the business itself. So we're going to do the business model canvas. business model canvas is the lean canvas I mentioned earlier. We'll look at the revenue models and operational models, how you get there, financial planning essentials. Obviously, we won't be able to do that in too much detail, but I'll give you some basics. The funding landscape, how you go about trying to get investors and attract them, and so on. The pitch and the executive summary, that's an area that is super important and, again, often overlooked in terms of how much time it takes to do this well. And then we'll end with what I call the DBA advantage, 3 paths forward that you can follow to get your business off the ground. Okay. Okay, so let me open it up to questions now. Go ahead and pop any questions into the chat, and I will see if I can answer them. Is there a DBA-centered VC or PE fund? Good question. I don't know that myself. I would doubt it. Investors don't really care about research. They care about making money. So if it is a research-based, a research-based fund would be more like a government contract or something like that. But in terms of VC, having the source of your research come out of your doctorate, I think is a very credible starting point, but it's not going to be enough. No one is going to take your dissertation and consider it a viable investment opportunity. That was from JC. Okay. Louise, how should we start the business plan? How best to prepare for the next session? Oh, well, just show up. Make sure you're registered. Just show up. We're going to cover new material, so we're going to go over a little bit more practicalities for the business plan. But, just come with your ideas, and we'll do a similar format as we've done today. Should we not prepare a plan B and plan C in case plan 1 fails? So here's my answer to that. If you are worried that your plan A or first plan is going to fail, you don't have the right mindset yet for entrepreneurship. You have to be 1000% convinced that your solution is the solution. Okay? So for investors, they don't want to know that you have a plan B and a plan C. They want to know that plan A is the thing that you are most confident in, that you are sure it's going to work. And that's what your pitch is. Your pitch is convincing them that you are 1000% confident that this is the way it's going to work and this is the way they're going to make money, because that's what they care about, right? Is making money. So maybe, Sanjeev, if you put that in your back pocket to have a plan B and plan C, fine. But honestly, they don't really want to hear that. They want to hear that your work and the research you've done and all the evidence that you're showing and all the assumptions you've made is what's going to make it successful. Okay. How do you classify your research as science-backed? Is there a percentage of your findings that needs to be classified as this? Michelle, I'm not sure that there's any particular number. I think the more evidence you have, credible evidence that you have to back up your assumptions is better, right? The more science-backed evidence that you can present, the more credible you'll be to investors and to customers and to business partners and so on. The more assumptions you make that are just because I think. In fact, I tell my students when they're pitching, they're not allowed to use the words I think. I think is not allowed. I think has no value. Research shows that. The evidence shows that. That's credible. But I think, I don't care who you are in the world, I think doesn't mean anything. So you do need to try and use as much science-based research as possible. However, investors are notoriously have short attention spans. They're not going to read every word. So don't overwhelm them with a lot of academic work. You want to be very sharp with your words. You want to be very precise, not a lot of extra words. And it's really like evidence says this, and so on. Okay. Kim, I'm not going to